In some cases, it is helpful to put a transaction on hold and recall it at a later time. An example may be a customer's gotten to the tender step but needs to run back out to their car to get their wallet. At any point during a transaction, it is possible to put the transaction on hold. While holding the Control key, push the F12 function key. The cashier is prompted to enter a comment. Make this something meaningful that identifies the transaction on hold. Note that there is now a pause icon in the status bar that indicates there is a transaction on hold. To recall a transaction that has been put on hold, click the F11 Recall function key, choose Recall a transaction from on hold, and click OK. You will see a list of all the transactions on hold and can select the appropriate transaction for recall. The transaction will be loaded and can be tendered normally. There are a few ways to process a return in RMS. The best way is to recall the original transaction. This assures that all of the information in the transaction is correctly reversed. Click on the F11 Recall button and choose Recall a transaction for return. Click OK. Choose the date range the transaction occurred within and select the transaction from the list. If they have been set up, you may be prompted to enter a reason code to specify why the items are being returned. In some cases, the item will be returned to regular inventory for resale or be moved to offline inventory, for example when the item is damaged but is still tracked. The transaction is brought up with negative quantities and red font. Tender the sale and choose the tender type being used to process the return. Click OK to finalize the transaction. If it is not possible to recall the exact transaction for return, a blank return transaction can be created. Push Ctrl F4 to set the transaction to a return. If applicable, choose the appropriate reason code. You'll notice that the status bar now has an icon with a red triangle. This means that anything added to this transaction will be added at a negative quantity. Scan or look up the item being returned. Notice that it is entered with red font and a negative quantity. When tendered, this transaction behaves like a return. A void is very similar to a return, with the exception that it can only be performed on a transaction that has happened in the current batch. Click on F11 Recall and select Void a transaction. Click OK. Choose the default date range for today and click OK. Select the transaction to void. Select the appropriate reason code. You are taken to the tender screen to reverse any payments. Tender the transaction. To apply a discount to a transaction or to particular items in the transaction, first add an item to the order. Use a barcode scanner or push F2 to look up and add the item. The discount menu is accessed by pushing the Shift F3 function key. By default, RMS will set the discount method for the transaction. This means that any items in the transaction, or that will be added to the transaction, will have a fixed discount rate. On the left-hand side of the discount window, the discount action can be changed to Set Price Level for Transaction, Perform Discount on All Items, or Perform Discount on Current Item. You'll notice that the last option is grayed out. This is because we do not have an item highlighted on the transaction screen. On the right-hand side, the discount method is chosen, and a discount is entered. For this example, we will choose to discount from retail price, enter 10 in the percent field, and click OK. Select the appropriate reason code, and click OK. The items that have a discount applied will be shown with a bold font, and the discount rate can be seen in the status bar at the top of the screen. The transaction can be tendered normally. Next, let's apply a discount to a specific item. First, add two separate line items to the transaction. Move the blue cursor to the item you would like to discount. Push Shift F3. This time, the discount action defaults to performing the discount on the current item. Set the discount percent to 20 and click OK. Select the appropriate reason code and click OK. Notice that the discounted item is bold with a red lightning bolt, indicating that it has a discount applied. The status bar now shows the savings for the transaction. The transaction can be tendered as normal.